All right. All right. So we're letting folks in. Welcome, everybody. It is noon. It is the second Wednesday of the month, which means you are here at Sustainable in the City Thinking Upstream with myself, Jenn Harrman, with Zero Waste Nashville Group from Metro Nashville Waste Services, and with Patrick King, my bestest co-host from Urban Green Lab. And welcome, everybody. We're going to give it all, as usual, just a few minutes to get everybody settled, get in, get their lunches ready.
Oh, Jen, you are not on the presentation.
What? Oh, goodness gracious. What am I showing?
We're looking at now we are on the presentation. We're looking at the Zoom details.
Excellent. Here we are.
But anyway, welcome, everybody. It's Wednesday. It's Sustainable in the City Thinking Upstream. We're going to be talking about composting. We're going to get everything going in a couple of minutes. So grab your water, grab your afternoon tea, grab some lunch, grab whatever makes you feel comfortable and get ready.
This is going to be an excellent one. It's perfect to actually have this during lunchtime. So after you finish all your lunch, you've got some food scraps left over. You're going to get to learn about what you can do with those food scraps today. It's going to be perfect. Perfect timing. Patrick was just talking about his wonderful lunch today.
It was not a wonderful lunch at all.
It seems to be what we're always talking about is lunch. It's lunchtime. If you had anything exciting for lunch, feel free to throw that in the chat. We love to hear about.
Not to get into the details, but I had a very rushed lunch that took place in my car on the way to the office type thing. So hopefully everyone is at a little slower of a pace than Patrick was today. And hopefully you can savor what you're eating.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You've got to think about what you're eating, enjoy those tastes of food. I have fried rice today, homemade. So not rushed as much. Very exciting.
Dinner won't be rushed. For dinner, I'm doing chicken pita wraps. So that should be nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, yesterday we cooked up peppers from the garden. I don't know about the rest of you, if any of you have gardens out there, but I have so many peppers, I don't know what to do with them. Hundreds of serrano peppers. So everything in that I'm cooking right now is very, very spicy.
That sounds
excellent.
I have 2 habanero bushes that are starting to produce peppers. Then I also have a Scotch bonnet, which is huge and terrifying because once this, like if anything, like both of those are like spicier than serranos, and also I have more of them. So I'll be expecting some hot sauce from me shortly.
Excellent. We'll have to do a trade, a pepper trade. I like it. Awesome. Well, all right. Well, I think we've got a good number of folks in here if we're ready to get started. I think we can jump in. So as always, again, for those of you that are just hopping in, you have reached Sustainable in the City Thinking Upstream. So today's episode, we are going to be talking about Composting 101. We've got some excellent guests with us today to talk about that. But before we get there, just a few things to go over, some logistics for today. So first off, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, we will have time for that at the end to ask both of our guests. So please don't hesitate to ask questions in the chat. So that little bubble that says chat, use that and ask your questions. Make sure that when you do ask those questions, you can select in your chat to send that to all panelists and attendees and not just the panelists, because we love for everybody to be a part of those questions and see those questions. So make sure you set it to all panelists and all attendees as well, or everyone, whichever one it says. So just make sure you're sending that to everyone. And then if you have any issues, other than that, use the chat. You can reach to me or Patrick as well. And as always, this is being recorded, so we'll send out a recording afterwards. What else? Am I missing any other logistics? I don't think I am. I think that's it. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm really excited to introduce our 2 guests today. So I'm going to stop sharing. So who we have with us today, we have Ezell and we have Micah Puncochar. with, I was afraid I was going to butcher that. All right. So Clay is with the Compost Company, co-owner of the Compost Company, and Micah is co-owner of the Compost Nashville. So I am going to turn it over first to Clay to hear from him, and then we'll switch over to Micah, and they're going to tell us all about what they do to help us reduce our food waste here in Nashville through composting. So I'm going to turn it first over to you, Clay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jen, Patrick. Congrats on an awesome show. We really appreciate what you guys are doing, and appreciate being here to talk about what it is that we do in our sort of little lane of sustainability. I'm going to talk a little bit about not only the how, but I'm really going to start with the why of composting. It is in essence, a form of recycling, and it is something that is of great need for some reasons that we're going to explore a little bit. I'm going to just get this up and running real quick, and let's see. So anyway, Clay Ezell from the Compost Company. We have been around in the Middle Tennessee area since our founding in 2012. We operate both organic material collections and processing. We do a lot of processing out at our farm in Ashland City, Tennessee, where we take material that we collect from restaurants, grocery stores, schools, hospitals. It comes from far and wide. We also receive, thanks to the great work of Compost Nashville, a lot of material from restaurants and schools and places that we're not personally servicing, but and particularly residential collection. They do an amazing job there, and we're very proud to work closely with them. So just to talk a little bit about, why composting, what really is it? Composting is the transforming of organic materials into substances that are, that are suitable for growing plants and enriching soil. The process that we undergo is composting. The resulting material at the very end, which you see in that man's hands there, is the finished compost. And compost is essentially a natural soil enrichment. It is, it's fertilizer-esque, but not technically fertilizer, but it's important for increasing soil health, because after a century or more of what we refer to sort of ironically as conventional farming, a lot of our soils are in pretty bad shape. They don't retain water very well. They are almost nutrient, depleted, and they need a lot of help. And that's why we're, kind of constantly relying on chemical fertilizer in a lot of, especially our large scale farming. So we try to accomplish two things through composting. One, and sort of our primary and first step of the process is landfill diversion. And why? Because landfills really aren't a great solution. They are, and have been for a long time, a cheap and convenient one, but one that is not sustainable in the long term. As our population grows, we're producing more and more waste, and it's harder and harder to keep just sort of shoving all of that stuff under the bed and acting like it's not really a problem. And one important thing to note here is that organic material is one of the largest inputs in landfills today. It's also one of the more problematic in that organic waste does not break down in the way that it's supposed to in a landfill sort of setting. If you throw an apple on the ground out in the woods, nature has a very, very well-defined millions-year-long solution for that. Something is going to eat it, or microbes are going to get to it, and it is going to become part of the soil again, and then hopefully go on to help grow more apples. But if you take millions of those, or hundreds of thousands plus, other millions of tons of other types of food waste, and put them in a landfill environment, they create enormous amounts of methane. And that is one of the most potent greenhouse gases that we know of. Estimates range from between 25 to 80 times more potent than the most famous one, CO2. And so our first sort of order of business is keeping that material out of landfills. And as you can see, based on this graph, there is an enormous amount of it. And up to half of what is going into landfills every day could be composted, because paper and paperboard and lots of other things can also be composted along with food waste and green waste. But we're going to talk a lot about food waste today. That's one of the ones that's getting the majority of the interest from amazing organizations like the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Urban Green Lab, and thankfully Metro is, they're paying a lot of attention to it because of these problems, and also because of the benefits of compost use. This is sort of the other half of the equation, where keeping the material out of the landfill provides an environmental benefit. It also, practically speaking, is a benefit just because landfills are getting harder and harder to site, and space is getting more and more sort of precious, so to speak. And so why keep throwing material like that into a landfill environment that is finite versus going into a place where we can actually turn that waste into a resource? And some of the benefits of compost use, which we'll probably come back to, promoting higher crop yields, suppressing plant disease and pests, reducing the need for chemical fertilizers. It also does a lot of amazing stuff in stormwater retention, erosion control. And one of the most exciting things that's going on right now with a lot of studies is carbon sequestration in soil. You may have heard a lot about how we can prevent further emissions, but there's also a lot of attention being paid to what we do about all the emissions that have already gone out into the atmosphere. And so there are certain projects like drawing down, bringing carbon out of the atmosphere. And the two best things that can possibly do that, well, the single best is plants. And promoting better soil health creates more plants, creates a better method of drawing carbon out of the atmosphere. But improving soil health not only increases more plants, but good soil actually draws carbon out of the air by itself. And so there's some really cool work being done around carbon sequestration, which is another and sort of newer benefit of compost use. So food waste, because it is getting a lot of the attention right now, is one that is an enormous problem. And many of you may be familiar with this, but for those of you who aren't, we're talking about 131 billion pounds of food waste in the US alone on an annual basis. It is incredible. Roughly 40% of what is produced to be eaten is never gets there. It's wasted at the farm level, it's wasted in the distribution level, and it's wasted and in businesses and in large measure in homes too. Roughly 25% of what we buy at a grocery store for the average family is wasted. And it's about $1 trillion in food value. And so yet another reason to avoid it, at least from going to the landfill. If, while we're working on some of the other distribution problems and finding ways to get food, to people, people or animals to eat it, we can at least be diverting it from the landfill to recover some value in the form of a natural soil additive and an emissions diversion. This is a pretty, revealing example of what it looks like in our practice. This is a pretty typical site out at the Compost Company. We work with food distributors who will send us loads that have been rejected for various reasons. And this is about 30,000 pounds of a 40,000 pound spinach load that arrived on our doorstep one day. And we see quite a bit of these. And that is because there are lots of rules and regulations about food safety. And if some of this food has to be rejected by the distributor, fortunately, we have the means to be able to deal with this. But one of the other problems with food waste is the resource intensity of producing this stuff. I mean, you've got, what, about a quarter of the land and water used in our country and worldwide is for food production. And again, 40% of that never actually reaches its intended destination. But you've also got labor and the fossil fuels required for moving this stuff all around. And ultimately, having it just end up in the trash is a crying shame as far as we are concerned. And so we are trying to figure out a better directive for this. Now, while we are composting, it's not just food waste that we handle. We also do a lot of green waste and yard waste. This is one of the most important ingredients in getting our mix right for producing finished compost. We have to pay a lot of attention to the ratios. Otherwise, it doesn't break down correctly. Essentially, what we're trying to do is mimic what would happen in nature, but we're operating on kind of a finite space, and we need to do so without it smelling bad, so that we can be a good neighbor in Ashland City. And so a lot of effort goes into making sure that our ratios are right on the front end. Another thing that we are seeing a whole lot of now is compostable serviceware. Thankfully, more restaurants and schools and things are getting on board with waste diversion. And with that now comes a lot of single-use materials. The good news is a lot more of these single-use materials are compostable these days, thanks to a gaining popularity. And with that popularity, they become a lot more cost-effective. They're not without their challenges. It can be difficult for people to make sure that it gets into the right bin when they're making a choice after they've had their meal. One place, I don't know if hopefully a lot of you spend a lot of time at the farmers market over on Rosa Parks Boulevard. They do an amazing job. They source nothing but compostable serviceware over there. They have the bin system designed to make sure that everybody can put these materials in the right place so that they can actually live up to their potential. It always sort of breaks my heart when I see a compostable cup end up in the garbage when there are better options. So this is a bit of the practical of sort of how we do what we do. We are on the front end of our operation. We are sending trucks out on the road every day to go and pick up material from those people we discussed earlier, coffee shops and grocery stores and schools. You can kind of see in the top left, the kids love kind of coming out and seeing what we're doing when we're picking up our material. In the top right, you've got an example of what we're doing at some of our area convenience centers. Thank you, Metro, for offering an option for drop-off. And then for some of our larger producers, like say the Music City Convention Center, where we're using fairly large dumpsters. But there's a lot of waste out there getting collected between us and Compost Nashville. We are doing millions of pounds of it a year, but there's still a lot of work left to be done because we're still kind of scratching the surface. With this comes a lot of education. So hopefully if you see some of these signs around and composting is an option, do us all a wonderful favor and give it a quick read. It will make everybody's life so much easier. And sooner or later, this one's going to come up. There we go. Just sort of another example of what you may see out there if you are on the Vanderbilt campus, or at the 5th and Broadway is a new place where we've got a program going now, or this kind of thing at the farmers market. So a little bit about just kind of the logistics of how composting works. This is fairly old, but most recent sort of aerial that we've got of our composting site. It is this is our place out in Ashland City where this material sort of comes in, and I hope you can kind of see this cursor, but it comes in the door, and I'm going to do this very quickly, very sort of 20,000 foot, literally. The material comes in the door and we blend it in the right ratios, and out here it comes onto our composting pad. This is where a lot of the magic happens. And after about 30 days here, having air pumped through the material, it is ground over where we screen it. And that's basically sifting out the good from the bad. And that gets screened several times with this machine. They all look so tiny. They're actually sort of enormous. But after a certain period, it works its way back towards the door so that we can get it into the hands of farmers and gardeners and landscapers. And please forgive the music, but this is just kind of an overview. Again, kind of an old one now that I look at it. This is about 3 years ago, but this is sort of what it looks like in practice. So that's sort of a quick overview of sort of what it looks like. And this is an example of a lot of the people who are doing it out there. Over the years, we've been lucky to have some institutions, large and small, get on board with what we are doing. It is an important thing to do. We're also really happy that some of the new businesses that have come to town are used to this kind of service. With the new Amazon headquarters, it was something that they needed to get going pretty much right away, and they're off to an amazing start because a lot of their employees were already doing this elsewhere. And so we're thrilled to be seeing, outside of some COVID-related disruptions, that composting is alive and well, and there are more and more people doing it. Of course, as we see more people doing it, we are seeing a lot more compost, which kind of brings us to the second half of what we do, which is actually get this compost out to lots of different people. And compost goes to a variety of different folks. Thankfully, we're seeing more and more uptake in some arenas outside of where you would normally expect. I mean, in our early days, it was all going to farmers and homeowners and the occasional landscaper. We eventually started bagging it for retail sale, but that's still a tiny fraction of what we are doing of our distribution. But one of the things that we're really excited about now is we're seeing a lot more of that material used in stormwater management. I mentioned briefly earlier that was one of the avenues, but this is something that, thanks to some thoughtful Metro code language, it is required in construction projects of a certain size to manage stormwater that touches their site. Generally speaking, when you pave over an area that was formerly grass, water doesn't infiltrate anymore. And basically what they're doing by building either rain gardens or bioretention installations is making sure that water stays on site rather than running off with all of the oil and whatever it may have picked up on the concrete into the nearest storm drain and straight down into the Cumberland or the nearest creek. And this is something that we're thankfully participating a lot more in, and we're hoping to see a lot more of. We think it'll be a big part of a lot of the construction that's going on to develop the east bank of the Cumberland River. And it's an exciting new avenue for this material, because it is kind of a challenge at some point while we bring up more material than finding outlets for it. The demand has always been good, but Compost Nashville is bringing us a lot more every day. We're picking up a lot more every day, and so it's always one of our central challenges is to make sure that this is getting distributed out in wonderful ways. And that is sort of us in a nutshell. I'll be happy to answer any other questions you guys may have down the line towards the end of the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Clay. And we do have some really good questions, but I'm gonna hold off on them, and we are going to put those at the end, and we are going to jump into you, Micah. So if you want to flip-flop screens, and we will switch on over.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thanks to Jen and Patrick for putting this on. It's really great to speak with all of you. And I can see when Clay was talking, some of the awesome questions popping up, and I love the engagement. Well, I'm here with Compost Nashville to talk to you guys about sort of what we do. And it very much is hand in hand with what the Compost Company is out to achieve. We have been in business just a little over 7 years. And it sort of came from an epiphany of the idea that we believed, for a variety of reasons, that people should compost. I'm a home gardener, so I always think everyone should compost in their backyard. And yet, for a variety of reasons, a lot of people don't have backyards. They don't want to compost. They don't know how. They can't. They're not allowed. And for a variety of the reasons, we started our business of having a service that comes up and picks up your food waste, to make that possible for every single person in the Nashville area. So we have two branches of our business, and one of those is the residential collection, where we put, you've probably seen them around town. We put 4-gallon buckets. We deliver those. People fill those up weekly, and we come and leave you a nice clean bucket each week for you to fill up again. And we have a commercial service as well. So like Clay, we have a lot of great local restaurants and schools, caterers, florists, even architects that throw away their drafting paper, and instead of it, maybe or maybe not be recycled, it goes and gets put back into the earth, thanks to the good work of the fellows over there at the Compost Company. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what we do, an overview, and then hopefully answer some questions. I come from the, hold on. Let me share that screen. Okay. Okay, so here is our business, Compost Nashville. You've probably seen our vans going around town. And like I said, I grew up here in Middle Tennessee. And my mom, she was the one that really spearheaded the garden. And one of the early, no-brainers that kind of happened when I was a kid gardening was learning how historically challenging the soil can be in Tennessee. You either have rock right at the soil. If you ever, if you grew up in Mount Juliet or Lebanon, you've got limestone coming right up at the top of the soil. Other parts you have, clay, dirt. And it was a very obvious thing that for me as a gardener to say, like, this has to be a part of everyone's garden and yard. And so again, we started this business to make it easy for folks. This is what we do. As you can see on the left-hand side, we really focus on making pickup of compostable goods easy. So we've got, like I said, we have the residential and we have commercial. So we're picking up the food scraps on organics. Another big thing that we do is events. This is becoming more and more common. Just recently, we composted the Deep Tropics Festival, which is electronic music festival that they have in the Bicentennial Mall area, right next to the farmers market. And they are aiming to be the cleanest festival in the country, which is really neat. And we are a part of that. And it's becoming more and more common. Even Patrick, he's got an event coming up that we're going to help him compost, which is pretty exciting. And we love that people are thinking that way. That when they say, if people are gathering, then let's compost. I have a very large family, and I think the pre-pandemic Thanksgiving, I guess that was in 2019. I've got a niece who is studying a lot of sustainable issues in college. So we made a sort of a family bet to see how much compost we would have at our Thanksgiving, which is, there's like 25 or 30 of us. There's a lot of Puncochars. So if you ever meet with Puncochar, they're directly related to me, by the way. So let them know that you saw me saw me speak at this event. So we collected maybe like 20 to 40 gallons of compost. And a lot of that was scraps and little things like that from our own family Thanksgiving. So that was a fun experiment. And then, as you can see here, going next thing, the compostables. Clay touched on this. As a society, we love convenience. That is not something that I think will change overnight. And we all know that people love the single-use items, be it styrofoam cups from Chick-fil-A to coffee cups from Starbucks or McDonald's. And what I love to see is that these compostable single-use items are becoming more and more common. And the price of those is becoming more and more feasible for folks because it's becoming more and more common. So I think any time that you can purchase those for yourselves, or give a good old attaboy to any other restaurant or organization here in town that is using those, then please do that. It's a really encouraging thing to see that is becoming more and more common. And they pretty much, another important sort of factor, they pretty much don't break down in your backyard compost. I have personally tried to compost some of these things, and maybe some of the paper cups, of course, will, but the PLA, or the plastic looking clear cups, they really need to go to a commercial facility like what Clay has out there in Ashland City. And speaking of that, one of the really amazing benefits of a commercial facility is the amount of material they can take. And I don't mean the volume they can take. What I mean is, there's the no-brainer part where you think, okay, yeah, sure, my lettuce scraps, a tomato, a pepper can go in the compost. And that's what we all grew up with if you grew up composting. One of the awesome things about the system that they use in Ashland City, because they're piping that hot air, is they can break down almost anything that's organic. So we work with very meat heavy restaurants, and they're throwing bones and whole fish heads and leftovers from their clients. It is all breaking down at the Compost Company, Ashland City. So that's why I personally use our service, and I also compost for my garden. So a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm putting my leftovers, or what my kids don't eat, into the green buckets, and then I'm putting all the the slightly more untouched by grease and oil and those things, the peppers, the tomatoes, the lettuces, in my home garden. So that is something that is so fantastic about what Clay and those guys are doing out there, is that they can really take those things that you wouldn't want in your backyard compost for a variety of reasons, of which we can go into the question and answer. But that is it really expands the amount of things that can go in your compost bin. And of course, like Clay mentioned, one of the things to really think about is when food waste is not composted, it's in the landfill. And in that environment, without oxygen, it's releasing methane. And there's a quote that is, if you know better, do better, right? And so this is one of those things where, okay, we know better, so this is time for us to do better. And so I hope that that one of the takeaways of this talk is that it really is easy to compost, whether it be at home or with a service like ours. But it really does make a difference. And that's one of the things that I think is really awesome, because we, as a company, we started off using literally a Toyota Camry, and we called it the Compost Camry. And we had plastic totes in the back. And in 7 years, thanks to the city of Nashville, we just last month had our record month with over 160,000 pounds of food waste diverted. So, and that went all out to Ashland City. And Clay, like you said, that's building, mountains and mountains and mountains of material. And we're so thankful that the city is so supportive. And the last part of our program, as you can see on the right-hand side there, is we do a compost return. So if you are a residential client, you can earn bags of those finished compost that Clay showed you guys. And you can add that to your garden, or you can top dress, some trees in your yard, or if you don't have a garden, you can donate that to local farms or local schools. And for our commercial clients, they actually choose where they want bulk material to go to, which is sort of a share of what they've diverted. So I think this year, I don't know how many yards it is, I don't know, somewhere between 25 and 35 yards of compost will be diverted, will be donated to local farms and gardens. So some of our restaurants actually, they compost and then they donate their finished product to farms that they buy from, which I think is an awesome, really closed loop system. So if you want to get in contact with us or have more questions, it's a pretty simple way to do it. So there's our our email address there. That's for general questions. Our website. And then we are very active on social media. And if you want to do a follow on Instagram or Facebook, you'll see a lot of tips, a lot of good content for how to divert waste or how to use less waste and all kinds of neat things. And there's our Twitter handle as well. And our residential service starts at $35 a month. And our commercial service starts at about $130 a month. So if you're in an office setting, for those of us who have gone back to office, which a lot, is not that many people yet. We're still have a lot of offices that are still paused. And I know Clay can relate with that compost with us. But if you are in an office setting, we work with all sizes of office. We have offices of 3 people and 3,000 that divert their coffee grounds and leftovers and pizza boxes and those things. So that is how to get in touch with us. And that is the end of my program. So thank you so much for listening. And I'll hand it over to you, Jenn and Patrick, and look forward to chatting with you guys in the question and answer period.
Yeah.
Awesome, Micah. Thank you so much for that. And yes, we do have questions rolling in, and they keep coming in. So Jenn, I think we can just go ahead and get to the questions. And for everybody else on the line, as questions come in, please feel free to ask them. Linda, I see your hands raised. Just want to remind everyone again, if you do have any questions, put them into the chat, and we'll get to them in the order that they came in. So Linda, if you do have a question, I would suggest just dropping that in the chat. Our first couple of questions I'm going to throw to you, Clay, but Micah, feel free to hop in there as well. So this first question comes from Lori. It's, do you get any expired food from grocery stores? Throwing that one at you, Clay.
We do. There's some of it goes to animal feed. There's Walmart stores contract a company called Organics with an X, and they divert the majority of that towards animal feed. There's a lot of debate about whether or not cows should be eating a lot of the things that are in there. However, animal feed does exist a little higher up the composting hierarchy of the EPA versus as a better use. On the other hand, like say Whole Foods is a grocery store chain that we work with directly, and in order to compost things like meat scraps and compostable serviceware and paper, cardboard, things like that, they had to divert it to composting. It couldn't go to animal feed. So that's a long way of saying yes, it does.
Okay. All right, next one is I think this one I'm not sure who this one came from, so I'm sorry. It's, are biodegradable and compostable items regulated/certified? I often fear greenwashing when I see these products. And I think I also provided some information in the chat that there is a difference between compostable and biodegradable. So I want to take that first question, toss that to you, Clay, and then open up the second part of that question and talk a little bit more about biodegradable versus compostable to the both of you.
Sure, and I'm sure Micah can speak to this as well if there's anything I whiff on. Yes, biodegradable and compostable are two very different things, because basically anything's biodegradable eventually, and so, and a lot of those biodegradable things depend on conditions that don't exist in any kind of facility where that trash might end up. It needs to be light to break it down. It needs turning or something along those lines. But they're just not, basically the big difference for certified compostable is that it will break down in a facility like ours. As Micah mentioned, like backyard composting, I've tried it too. It's impossible with the PLAs. I had one cup that lasted 2 years. But they are regulated, but there's still a bit of a wild west out there where a lot of products are coming out sort of saying they are, or unfortunately, a lot of what we see is say a coffee cup that is 70% compostable. The other 30% is completely bloody non-compostable. It's a plastic liner on the inside of the cup where there's no way to separate those things. And so unfortunately, and the other challenge is that a lot of those products can be pretty hard to distinguch between. Somebody, even a well-meaning somebody, might not be able to tell because a lot of them aren't labeled all that well, and some of them are sort of misleading on the labeling. But there's more and more good stuff out there, thank goodness.
Right.
Yeah, I'll chime in too. I think that, one of my co-founders, whose last name is Beetlecombe, a lot of people know him as Beetle. He will say the term biodegradable is meaningless in these conversations. And, speaking of greenwashing, I mean, sometimes, Clay, I know you've seen this, you'll literally see a green band around a cup. And our minds are such that's, oh, okay, this has got to be compostable. This is awesome. They're everywhere. Well, there really is, it really is important to see that, BPI certified compostable somewhere on that, and that it goes to a facility like Clay's. We sell compostable goods, and we're happy to make that easy for our clients to think of us as sort of a one-stop, source for everything composting related. But there are some clients who buy those goods from us and yet don't yet compost. So that isn't really that's this other side of the greenwashing thing, where they're buying the right thing, but it's not going to the right destination. So pretty key component. I mean, I'll take leftovers from restaurants, and I'm so thankful that people are switching over. Even like the hot dog stand in East Nashville, like they've switched over to compostable containers, and I love it. I can take it right home and put it in my container. So pretty important.
Got two additional follow-up questions on this subject, and I think Rachel was actually the person who asked it. She was. Okay, great. So if, and Micah, I think you just covered this. So if a certified compostable item ends up in a landfill, it's as if the item wasn't even compostable in the first place, right? Because we get into the conversation around anaerobic and anaerobic and I don't know. This is y'all's field of expertise, but yes, the different ways the material breaks down.
Yeah, and I guess I think of it like if you've bought a compostable cup and you've spent the extra money, because it is extra money, and it goes into landfill. I guess one of the benefits I see in that is that it's not petroleum based. So, and that's sort of, no pun intended, grasping at straws here, so it is better than nothing, but you sort of wasted your money a little bit. So,
and also aerobic and anaerobic. I had it. A colleague of mine once said, biodegradable just means it gets into smaller pieces. So if you have a biodegradable plastic bag, and under the ideal conditions, you'll just have a bunch of pieces of microplastic. So that's not really helping anything. If anything, that's making it worse. But Micah and Clay, to y'all's point, oftentimes those bags don't even end up in conditions where they can biodegrade. They just go to the landfill. So moving on to our next question here. This one comes from Bradley, and Clay, this is for you. I see gases and vapors rising out of the compost piles. What do these give off?
Gotcha. In large measure, it's steam. The insides of those piles are really warm. We see temperatures ranging from about 90 degrees when it's getting pretty mature, but during the processing phase, it can get up to 165 to 190 is about where we start getting nervous, and we need to back it down and make sure that it doesn't get too hot. But especially in the right weather conditions, they produce a ton of steam. That there is some CO2 associated with that. It is not emission free, but it is a lot less than would be coming out otherwise, and it certainly isn't methane, thankfully.
And I'm not sure on the kind of like the scale, but like methane is anywhere from 25 times to 70 times more harmful to the atmosphere than CO2. So yes, anything we can do to reduce methane is going to ultimately be better for our lives and for the climate. So,
and I'll say one of the important things about when you see that steam, when you hear those temperatures, one of the benefits there is it's gonna kill certain things, and one of those things is seeds. So that's one of the great things about if you were to buy the compost from the compost company, you're not going to have in my home compost, I do the sort of lazy style. I know Jenn and I have talked about this. I throw my compost on my, and then I get cucumbers and squash and tomatoes. And half the time I just say, well, this is a volunteer garden and the volunteer state, let's do this thing, but you won't get those seeds. And then also any foodborne pathogens at all
Mhm.
that is being killed by those high temperatures. So that's a good thing
Yep.
to see that steam.
Thanks, Micah. Yeah, that's one of our biggest concerns is we have to keep it above a certain temperature for a certain period of time to make sure that it's safe going out and doesn't
Mhm.
have any E. coli or anything like that in it.
Mhm.
Right. Yep. Clay, this next one is for you. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this next one is for you. In your presentation, there were a couple of signs that you had, and someone just was curious if those are downloadable on your website somewhere.
I don't know that we have them up for download. Generally speaking, we distribute them to our our customers, whether it's a school or something to put up in their kitchen or on their bins. But I'd be more than happy to share them.
Perfect. Okay. And this next one for you is for you as well. Is there runoff protection for the Cumberland associated with your site, Nashville City?
Yes, stormwater is not only a good source for finished compost, but it is something that we have to think about all the time on our site. Our entire site is set up kind of like a mini watershed. Anything that comes and touches our site has to stay on site, and that is per regulation from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. So I know I breezed through kind of our site map and the route, but on one corner of our site, we have some retention ponds, and any water that touches any waste material or even the finished compost is collected in 2 different ponds, and we reuse that water because moisture is really important in our compost processing. So we cycle that water through over and over and over again.
Okay, thank you for that. And Clay, this is one more question for you, and it's how often do you check the biological activity of your compost? What numbers are you looking for?
Frequently. We are looking, we send off lab results on a quarterly basis to make sure that the compost is both mature, pathogen-free. We're always on the lookout for things like salt content and heavy metals and lots of stuff. But one of the first things we do, because lab testing is pretty expensive, actually we're down to biannual now, because early on in our days we had to do it quarterly just to demonstrate that we knew what we were doing. And then after we got good results and after we were STA certified by the U.S. Composting Council, we're down to quarterly or biannual testing. We sort of earned that. But so we put samples of it under the microscope on a fairly frequent basis just to make sure that the microbial life is active in there, because that's one of the biggest, most important things about real soil health versus soil fertility, because you can spray tons of chemical on dead dirt and things will grow, but real soil health, lasting soil health, is not just nutrient density, it's also the microbial life that is in there that is keeping the soil nice and loose and friable, and it contains billions of microbes. And so we look at that. We also do bioassay testing on all of our material, where we are doing controlled sample growth against, say like a Scott's Miracle Grow or something, that is kind of an established product. We're growing samples of cucumbers and different things in our greenhouse to make sure that compost is growing well. Because if that's not doing well, then that would be our first sign that maybe something is wrong. And then we'd have to go investigate further with some serious lab testing. Gotcha.
All right. Well, Clay, thank you for that. Moving over, Micah, we do have some. Oh, wait, no. Yeah. Micah, first question. Will Compost Nashville offer pickup to Rutherford County ever? I want to participate so bad, but I'm not located in Davidson County.
That's an awesome question. We do hear from certain areas like Murfreesboro and Hendersonville that people are saying, please just let us know. We hope to be in the borough one day. One of the big things on our end is from a business standpoint is to grow in an intelligent way, and part of that is to never travel too far. We like it to be where the stops are only several minutes at most apart, and also we have big heavy trucks, and those trucks need fuel, and we're all very well aware of not only the environmental costs of that, but also just the straight business costs. And we take our stuff out to Ashland City, And Murfreesboro, unfortunately, is in the exact opposite direction. But what you can do is go on our website and sign up, and there will be an automatic, I believe, a system where you may get you're out of our range currently, but we'll put you on that Murfreesboro list so that when the day comes that we do come out there, or in Hendersonville, or wherever you might live that isn't serviced from us, then you will be the first one to know. So thank you for your interest out there in Murfreesboro.
Yeah. This next one is, how can we get our compost picked up for an event? And before you answer that, Micah, you did mention I am actually getting my wedding in October. Composted services provided by Compost Nashville. So shout out and thank you.
We're happy to do it. It's going to be awesome. I think I'm going to weasel my way into that reception. It sounds pretty awesome, man. If you see me dancing to the side, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just the compost guy. Don't worry about him.
Yeah, just don't even worry about it.
Yeah. Compost wedding crashers. I don't know, Clay. You think there's a film we can make for that?
As long as you bring me as the date, I'm ready to rock.
You ready to be my +1?
Yeah.
Sold. Come through. But for folks who are interested in getting their events composted, what's the best way to get in touch with y'all for that?
It's you have to fill out an inquiry form on our website. So compostnashville.org, and you can fill out a form. It'll come to me, and we'll talk about particulars. And for those events, we actually do service places like Murfreesboro. A lot of weddings venues are scattered throughout Middle Tennessee, so we'll go out to Lebanon, places like that. No problem.
Yeah. And just a personal thing, I will add that you can get composting services for almost any event. Most venues are open to that idea as well. It's not a heavy lift as long as those services are provided in the area or city that you're choosing to do so in. So if you have any events coming up, folks, events produce a lot of waste. I think we can all rest easier at night if we know that some significant amount of that waste is being composted.
Yeah, and I think Clay and I, we dream about the day where every venue it is if it's not required, it's an option. To say, right, we're gonna we're recycle, we can compost. What do you want to do? That hopefully is coming down the line.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But we as individuals, I think there's a certain level of responsibility there we can take as well to advocate for those kind of things at different venues, or with our vote, if that's something that our vote can be applied to as well. So don't think you don't have a role to play, everybody.
Right.
Next question I have here is, how does composting compare to feeding food scraps down the garbage disposal? Water treatment, I assume, precipitates the solids and must generate a lot of compost-like material. I'm going to throw that one to the both of you.
Okay, that's one I'm happy to talk about. I've heard that one a lot. Like, why don't I just use my disposal for that material to go? One part of it is the guys at the wastewater treatment plant are not a big fan of your disposal. They don't like it. It is difficult to deal with. It's actually also not the world's best plumbing choice in your house. They can be problematic. But the bigger reason really is that once that material is down the drain with everything else that is making its way from your toilet or the sewer that goes through wastewater treatment, the resulting material, yes, is oftentimes dried, pelletized, and becomes one of several classes of what are called biosolids. And that material can be used as a fertilizer and is for certain commodity crops. One of the reasons that it's not used for food production particularly is that with that combined waste, things like there are lots of hormones and antibiotics and other things that are found in wastewater biosolids that survive that process and will end up in the resulting soil. And so that's, and it can also be hard for that material to find a home. There's still a pretty good ick factor for biosolids, especially involving human waste. Again, sometimes that's used for like corn that's grown for ethanol, but it's, it smells, and like farmers are reluctant to take the material. And essentially a lot of our wastewater is currently going as daily cover at the landfill in Murfreesboro. And so effectively it's ending up in the landfill one way or the other. It's just gone through a whole lot of processing and trucking and all these other things to get there in a different form.
And can I add to that? As a Metro Water
Absolutely.
Services employee now. So we talked about this, I think a couple episodes ago. We are going to have some presentation coming up in our next quarter. We're going to get somebody to talk more about the biosolids process here, because here in Nashville, we have 3 wastewater treatment plants. So that biosolids process, one of those treatment plants currently, there is a process there that it does go through that anaerobic digestion but then that does end up being trucked to landfill, and everything did used to be trucked to landfill. But the other 2 treatment plants do create a Class A biosolid. So we will learn more about that and what that means in an upcoming episode of Sustainable in the City. But I just wanted to mention, as to Clay's point, in terms of the plumbing situation, people look at garbage disposals as this is, I can just put all this trash down here, and it's going to be fine. This garbage disposal will chop it up. And it'll be fine. But another issue with that is that that's going to clog your pipes. If you put any kind of like salad dressings or fats and oils and grease, that just, all that does is clogs pipes and creates a much bigger issue for your sewer system, not just when it gets to the treatment plant, but then also potentially for your community. That's how, if anybody saw there's been some articles in the past few years about fatbergs. If you've ever heard of a fatberg, that's how you get a fatberg, is by putting stuff down your garbage disposal. So, but I just wanted to throw that out, that we will have some folks from Water Services talk more specifically about our process here. But I don't know of any other biosolids processing in the greater Nashville area beyond Nashville. So that's 2 treatment plants here, but one other is absolutely, it's going, as Clay said, right to the landfill. So just throwing that out there.
Yes, everyone, please stay tuned for the wonderful wild world of wastewater treatment.
It'll be fun.
It's going to be a great episode. So this next one goes to you, Micah. Can or does Compost Nashville work with apartment buildings / dense housing areas? This is a great question.
We do, and that is a part of our vision to, I think, to have a greener city would be that as more and more apartment buildings, I mean, look around, they are being built all over town. Sort of like event venues. One day it'll be something that I think is sort of drawn in the blueprints. But as it stands right now, we absolutely work with apartment buildings. We work with condo. What's the word I'm looking for? The homeowners associations. And we work from a standpoint of, sometimes the HOA is footing the bill, and other times it's the actual the tenant who is getting our service going, and we are coming up into their hallway or outside their door, or it's sometimes brought down to a central area where, much like recycling would be. So we absolutely do that. And if you are coming into resistance from apartment building management, then that's where we can really be your ally. And we are happy to go talk to people, call them, and try to make it a reality. We actually had a funny story where recently we started a sort of Airbnb hotel client. They started a commercial service, and we dropped the bin off at the wrong, our large bin. We dropped it off at the wrong spot, and it was at some condos across the street. And the irony is that the people at the condos across the street started using the service, and Clay would be happy to know there was zero contamination. They were actually using it as they were supposed to, without any signage or anything else. And then our original client was saying, "Hey, about these pickups, when are you guys coming, and what's going on?" And it was a very, very hilarious faux pas in the business. But we absolutely would love to have a lot of apartment buildings with us. So let us know how we can help.
Yeah. And with that, I want to turn it over to Jenn. We do have several more questions. Please keep them coming in. But we do want to just be, cognizant that folks might not be able to stick with us a little bit longer on their lunch break. Thank you for your time. But Jen, before we get back to those other questions, we have a couple of announcements.
Yes. So just for everybody to note, coming up, again, we're going to send you that follow-up email. You're going to get, if you can't stay with us, you're going to get a link to the video so you can watch all the rest of the questions and follow up and keep those questions coming. Our next episode, so we're doing a whole month surrounded on food waste. We started with composting first, but next on September 22nd, we've got Food Waste 101, the Nashville Food Waste Initiative, and some other guests are going to be with us to talk about that higher level, so above that food rescue and being able to get, as I know you all were talking about, getting some of that good food to people in need here in the Nashville community, and how that's happening already, and how you can tap into that, and just learning more about those higher tier on that waste pyramid levels. Before we need to look at compost, how can we look at feeding people in need and using food for what it is, food, and preventing food waste in the first place. So we'll have a great series and talk on September 22nd. I will drop the link in our chat for you to sign up for that. And then we'll also at our next session be announcing Q4 of Sustainable in the City. So we have a whole nother quarter in the year to go of a lot of really good stuff to talk about. And in the meantime, if you have any other thoughts about any other programs or topics that you want us to talk about on Sustainable in the City, don't hesitate to email us and let us know what kind of things you want to hear about. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to go back to our questions, because I know there's some other good questions in there.
Yes, and the questions keep on coming in. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat. And our next one is, this goes to the both of you. I was told that citrus peels, such as oranges and grapefruits, should not be added to the compost pile. Is this correct, and why? And that one comes from Linda.
It's a good and common question, Linda. That guideline, generally speaking, refers to vermicomposting. The worms especially don't like citrus, and onions they're not big fans of. They also, sometimes in a home compost pile, if you are just a really regular orange and grapefruit lemon eater, it can create some moisture problems. But if it's going to Compost Nashville, if it's coming to us, we love it. We can, because we're composting at scale, we can take a lot of those things like meat, bone, dairy, citrus, anything that would be, and compostable serviceware that otherwise would be problematic in a home pile.
Yeah. And speaking of moisture, the next question is, should we water our compost?
We'll do it for you.
All right.
if you're a home composter, you're going to want to look at the moisture level. Absolutely. So
Okay.
And we'll put a link in too. We've got, so we at Metro Waste Services offer a Dirt on Composting, how to get started composting at home workshop. We offer that once a month. This is not what this was about today. So we'll drop a link into that and you can learn more about that in one of those upcoming programs. And we'll talk all about that.
Yep, and we'll be sure to include any and all resources mentioned in today's session on our follow-up email, which should be coming to you all first thing tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
so
I was going to add that if you are if you're a home composter, like I said, I use our service. I send a lot of my stuff out to Clay each week, but also I have several different sort of home composting setups, and one of those is leaf composting. Leaves, it's interesting. I think it's some sort of American OCD thing where we think we got to clean up this yard, we got to get these leaves out of here. That is nature replenishing itself. So if you must, rake them up, chip them up using I use one that just plugs in and it shreds the leaves into a bag, and then I spend about 6 months turning that, watering it when it's dry. But be using that in your compost and put that right back on your garden, put that right back around your maple trees or whatever trees you're growing. That is nature's way to fertilize itself. So that should be going back in your yard. So drive around, and all these, what I think they're fools to give away these brown bags of leaves. So I literally drive around East Nashville in the fall with my trailer, and I'm that guy picking up somebody else's leaves.
Yep. And it also provides a habitat for native tortoises, which we learned in a previous episode of Sustainable in the City.
That is awesome, and habitat for a lot of insects as well.
Yep.
A lot of beneficial insects plus fireflies, which are amazing.
So leave your leaves, I think is what we're saying.
They really is.
Micah, this next one is for you from a very special friend of ours. Hey, Alexa. How can we find out what restaurants and businesses are already composting in town, Micah?
Yep. So you can go to our website and see who's composting with us. You can also, you saw the slide that Clay shared. There are, I believe probably between our two companies, over 100 restaurants that are composting. And you can also ask the folks there if they're composting. Some people they still don't know it's an option. So I do believe that is one impediment for folks to start, is they don't even know it's a thing. And so, yeah, there is a link. There is a landing page on our website of who composts with us. But a lot of the local coffee shops compost with us. A lot of the great local, tends to be the chef-driven restaurants that tend to be the best, composters. And so that's where you can find that. And Alexa, I'll send you the $5 gift card. Just send me your mailing address.
Amazing. So this next question is, for anyone currently not in a service area, is there a way or place food compost? Wait, is there a way or place that food compost could be dropped off?
The city of Nashville currently sponsors drop-off points at 5 of our convenience centers around town. They are, generally speaking, for Davidson County residents. But if you are in Cheatham County, come on out to the Compost Company and drop your things by. Or if you're from any county, if you are willing to go to the effort to drive it to our site, it will cost you $0 to drop that material off. We want to give you that option. We do have some people who are driving from long distances to bring, stuff that they've been aggregating for quite some time. And it warms my heart every day that we see somebody who really will go to that effort. Like Michael was saying, our mission is to make it as convenient and as easy and accessible as possible, because we know that tide will rise, all the other boats. But you can drop it with us or at Metro Convenience Centers. Please do.
Love it. I have been a regular composter at home, but I just do it in a plastic trash can with holes in the top and bottom. I don't think the temperature is getting enough to kill seed viability, etc. This is not the best way, just a way to say this is using what you had. I've seen drum composters advertised, but is there a cheaper piece of equipment or technique that you could suggest? I'm not sure who dropped this question in tech, but I'll first go by saying you don't need anything in order to compost at home. You don't need to go out and buy anything. Chances are you have everything you need. And it sounds like from your setup, the only thing I would say, and I'm interested to see if this is a good answer, is you want to make sure it's raised off the ground so that there's no like vermin and stuff getting into it. And the only thing I would probably suggest is just make sure you're turning it every once in a while and kind of just making sure what's in your mix is, good for your mix. But I'll turn it over to the experts.
Sure. One of the other challenges of getting the temperature sufficient to kill pathogens and compost quickly and kill seeds is volume. Our piles on our aeration setups are 14 feet tall, 75 feet long, and about 100 feet wide. So we have the benefit of a lot which can insulate itself, and that really feeds on it. It's difficult if you've got an amount under a couple of cubic yards to keep it going, especially during the winter. You might have kind of a warm pocket in the middle, but the outside freezes or anything like that. So volume can be a really important thing. So if you want to do a nice big pile in your backyard, grab some of your neighbor's stuff, that can actually really help.
And I'm going to just jump in real quick because I actually have a trash can at home with a bunch of holes in it. And it's just really full, and it's always worked fine for us. But again, as Micah mentioned, I'm a very lazy composter, so if it takes 2 years, that's fine with me. But also, if you are wanting to upgrade to a different composter, that Dirt on Composting program, we give away 2 earth machines, which are it's made of recycled plastic. It sits right on the ground, and we just recommend that you put a mesh underneath it so that you aren't getting those rodents and things potentially getting in there, moles or whatever. But we give away 2 of those for free each webinar, and then we also sell them for $50 at our Omaha Convenience Center. So if you are looking for, you want to have something to contain it, because I will say from a Metro Code standpoint, if you do have an open pile and you're in an urban area and your neighbor doesn't like it, you could end up with issues if they're calling codes, and you want to kind of just, even though you can compost without a bin, it's just something to be aware of in terms of Metro Code. It's not illegal, but anything that is attracting rodents could be an issue.
Right.
And neighbors also may not like it, or maybe they love it. I like Clay's idea of asking your neighbors and then taking their food scraps as well, because then they'll love it.
Yep.
So,
Yes.
but just a couple of extra notes.
Yeah, and that way you won't get a cease and desist order on your compost pile.
They'll just be asked to they'll ask you to contain it.
So we have one more question here, and I'm just going to throw this out there for both of you as it relates to, it's 2 questions that relate to the same thing. The question is, can you comment on how many schools are composting and ways to make that successful if we want to work with our PTO/local school? And I'm going to open this one to everybody, including you, Jenn. Take it away.
Well, I don't know if you all, and Mike, I know you were picking up at Westmead Elementary, right, for a while. So Westmead Elementary is the one that I'm most familiar with, and they had done a really great pilot program, but with COVID, I believe that things had been kind of halted as part of that. So Metro Nashville Public Schools, each individual school would need to work with their principal to get something like that set up. And figure out a budget. There's not a budget in Metro Nashville schools for something like compost collection. So it's up to each individual school to kind of figure that out and work through that with their individual principals at this time. So I know Westmead had gotten some grants. We were looking at working with them on a pilot to try and demonstrate the cost benefit. So one thing with schools is that a lot of their waste is paper and cardboard, which they can recycle, and food waste. So if you have those 2 things that are being regularly collected, the idea and the hope is that you would be able to reduce the amount of times trash is collected. And that's the same for any kind of program, including our curbside program as well. So we were hoping to do a pilot to try and better demonstrate how that new system could potentially work, but COVID had put that on hold. So you would need to, as a parent, as a teacher, work with somebody in the school, work with the PTO and figure out some funding for that. And then someone like Compost Nashville could come out and do that. I know there are some schools that have gardens, and they will provide free compost bins for that garden for educational purposes, but the amount of food waste coming out of a school is huge. It's a lot. They do have compostable trays, but to both Clay and Micah's point earlier, those trays, if they're not going to a compost facility, they're not actually getting composted.
Right.
So hopefully that provided kind of a start to that answer. I don't know if you all have, I don't know other schools that have that set up other than Westmead at this point.
Yeah, I know that that between Clay's company and our company, there are several schools that are still actively composting. A lot of those are private schools that they have figured out a way to make this a line item in their budget. And of course, if you pay attention to anything in Metro schools, budget is always something that's a challenge. Having a daughter at our local Metro neighborhood school, you can quickly see that the budget just isn't there for something that's additional. Of course, the amount of food that's wasted, you could quickly tone that down with some of the things that are just get wasted and easily pay for itself. But of course, it doesn't work that way. So as a parent who's part of the PTO at our my daughter's school, I would say if it's important to the PTO, it'll happen. And reach out to Clay or I, and we'll come to your school. We'll get this the staff, trained, I mean, they could easily divert all the, the true organics that haven't touched any oils or anything, and maybe that goes to their school garden. And they can, give us all the stuff that needs to be processed in a commercial facility. So happy to try to get that off the ground. We want to be good stewards of our community. So if there's a thing where you say, hey, we need $1,000, we've come up with 800, then let's talk. Like, I'm open to try to meet you halfway somewhere and try to get that school composting. So I think if people start it, they'll see that it's a great thing. So, and easy.
Great. We do have one more additional question. This one comes from Elizabeth. I'm sorry if this is a repeat question, but do you think Nashville is getting closer to building an anaerobic digester?
That is a great question. The most recent efforts to get an anaerobic digester built ran into some siting problems, siting and budgeting problems. The site that was picked out, it became a political issue, and it lost the sponsorship in the city council. One of the other, challenges of a system like that is they're really expensive. So siting and budgeting are the most important things, and getting it close to any sort of urban center is really difficult. I mean, you look at cities around, the country, and most of the facilities like ours or even anaerobic digesters are, 30, 50, 60, 100 miles away, just like most landfills, or at least that they used to be. They put them out in sort of in the weeds for a reason. But then now, as population is growing, we're growing to now be living closer and closer to those things. And so, I don't know if that effort still has a lot of life left in it currently, or at least the one that was originally proposed. But it's not an easy thing to get something with any kind of waste management started.
Yeah. And that was a great nutshell. Thank you, Clay. Because that also is, it is definitely part of our zero waste master plan. And, it is definitely still something that's on our list. And I think you're right that conversation, as far as I know from that original system, was is no more. But that doesn't mean that the anaerobic digestion conversation isn't still ongoing here, at least within the zero waste team at Waste Services. So it's something that we are still looking at. And as there are opportunities to explore that more, we are definitely still doing so. There are active conversations, but at this point, kind of just where Clay said we were at, it's a challenge.
All right, well, that is all we have for questions. Rachel just shared a very interesting resource. My university won an EPA grant to get an anaerobic digester. Any nonprofit can apply as well. I'll be sure to include this in our follow-up email, but that brings us to the end of today's session. Micah, Clay, thank you both so very much for your time today, the knowledge you've given us. I personally learned a lot. It's just been really awesome to just see you both and hear you talk about compost. It's good stuff. I'll turn it over to Jenn, but I just wanted to say a big thank you to you both.
Yeah. Again, I love having you both. Every time I'm on a presentation with both of you, I always learn something new, and I love it. So thank you both so much for being here and talking more about your programs. You all do so much for the city in terms of food waste and reducing our food waste. And for all of you folks at home, as Clay mentioned, we do have our convenience centers for drop off. So if you have food waste materials that you want to drop off, you can do that. But we will provide links to all of their resources,
all of those things.
We'll make sure that you have a link to how to get a composter if you want to start composting in your backyard. We'll give you links to all of that. And if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I think with that, that's it for the day. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
We'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Sound good? Right. Happy composting, everyone.
Happy composting.
Hey, thanks. See you later.